Hello and welcome back to another Bolts Analysis 2020. My name is Chris and we're going to be looking at the Tampa Bay Lightning and the rest of the NHL. And we have entered a strange and unusual time of year because the Tampa Bay Lightning aren't playing for a while. Sorry. 28th is when we next play away at the Dallas Stars. But we'll start with that because I want to look at all the teams that are currently third, or at least were third in each respective division, and show you that that is not a safe place to be. Starting with Dallas, third in the Central. What happened to Dallas last time they played? Well, they played last night, and they lost 7-0. Nada, zilch, zip, against the Minnesota Wild. And suddenly I feel 1,000 times better about just losing to them 3-2. No, it doesn't seem nearly as bad. Can you imagine if we'd gone into that building and we go out and we just lost 7-0. The Minnesota Wild didn't see it coming. Suda, Stahl, Koivu, don't do this to me. Yeah, it's such a weird one. It's such a weird result because Dallas are one of those teams that you just think they're well drilled, they've got better, they're organised. Like, no, they're not, or at least they weren't last night. And this is a little bit of a worry for Dallas, just because, that third place spot, if you're second or you're first, you can feel pretty good about where you are. If you're third, you need to be mindful of what's behind you, because in some cases it's coming up on the rails and it's coming up fast. In Dallas's case, it's not too much of an issue, but to the two teams immediately behind them, Winnipeg and Chicago, are playing tonight. So one of those two is going to gain a bit of ground on Dallas. That's a worry. The other worry is that Minnesota appear to be improving, although it's worth noting their goal difference is still -11 despite winning 7-0. And Nashville got a win last night as well, and they've got games in hand. So Dallas, whoever they play next, need to play better than that, because that was atrocious. Moving on, third place in the Pacific. I mean, no place in the Pacific at the moment is safe. But for Calgary, it's got very awkward at the moment because they lost 5-2 to the Ottawa Senators, who have barely scraped 40 points. That's a bad loss in anyone's book. It's doubly bad if you're a Tkachuk, because you've just lost to the other Tkachuk, Matthew to Brady. I think that's the right way around. Brady for Ottawa, Matthew for Calgary. That's another loss on your sort of Eastern Canadian road trip. So you've lost to Ottawa and you lost to Montreal. Calgary now find that Edmonton and Vancouver are both ahead of them, which is, I would imagine, rather grating if you're a Calgary fan. But also Arizona and Arizona and Vegas are both sniffing around going, ooh, third place. We quite like the look of that. We might have that. So that's a worry for Calgary. But to be honest, I mean, the Pacific is kind of its own little entity. Anyone can be third at any point. I think Vancouver are currently first, but, a few hours before that it was Edmonton. It's all chopping and changing. Let's shift over to the Metropolitan New York Islanders. Oh my word. They were 4-1 up, and I've watched this because it happened to be on Free Sports. I've watched the full replay of it. They were 4-1 up at home to the Washington Capitals, looking good. 5 unanswered goals later, they've lost 6-4. 6-4. And with 5 minutes left, it was 4-3. So, a little bit sloppy, but, 5 minutes left. You protect that, or you at least let it go to overtime. Not 3 more unanswered goals. That's just... in a week as well, when you've lost twice to the Rangers, it just gets worse for the Islanders. And now everyone else in the Metropolitan, and there's quite a few other teams, are creeping up on the Islanders, and they're creeping up very quick. You have got Columbus Blue Jackets, looking rejuvenated, looking fantastic. They won 5-0 against New Jersey. They're coming up. They're 2 points behind. You've got Philadelphia Flyers. They beat the Los Angeles Kings 4-1. They're 2 points behind. You've got the Carolina Hurricanes, who the Islanders are playing tonight. They're 3 points behind. And even the Rangers must be looking at the Islanders going, ooh, we fancy this. We've beaten them twice. What say we overtake them? And the irony is that they have to win the next two games. You can't just let this slide keep happening, because at some point, one of Columbus or Philly and possibly Carolina is just going to overtake you, and you won't just be out of third, you might well be out of the wildcard spots the way it's going. So, huge game for the New York Islanders tonight. And lastly, we move over to third in the Atlantic, our division if you're a Tampa Bay Lightning fan. And here comes a new challenger, because the team that's in third is no longer the Toronto Maple Leafs. If the league was to stop now, the season was to stop, and we were to have the playoff round one starting, pretty much straight away, we would now be facing the Florida Panthers, which would be fun. And so where have the Toronto Maple Leafs gone? Well, they have, let's put it this way, they lost so badly that they managed to put themselves outside of both the top three of the Atlantic and out of the wildcard spots with a single defeat. That takes some doing. And I've watched the highlights of that, and they were atrocious against the Chicago Blackhawks, who are improving. Let's be fair, the Chicago Blackhawks are slowly working their way back into the possible sort of contention for a wildcard spot, but that does not excuse some of the goals. Just rank bad defending and bad goaltending as well. Anderson just not his usual self, not getting into position quick enough, letting shots go past him that he should be getting at least something on. A wraparound attempt that sort of just almost apologetically trickles past him. And I gotta tell you, it doesn't look good for the Maple Leafs at the moment. It looks particularly bad because, one, that was a bad loss, 6-2 at home to Chicago. 2, Florida won 4-1 and have overtaken them. And 3, Florida get another 2 games before their All-Star break, so they could easily end up a couple of days down the line being 4 points clear of Toronto and 1 point behind us. Minnesota and Chicago are the 2 teams that are sort of trying to stop that from happening, hopefully. I wasn't expecting any favours out of Detroit, but I guess we got a favour from Chicago because Toronto have effectively fallen further behind us. Not looking good at all. Other good bit of news for us, sort of moving away from the third places, but I think I've shown, demonstrated quite clearly how, how insecure that is as a place in the standings. You can easily go from being third to finding yourselves outside of the playoff standings and with work to do. In terms of first place standings, Boston were playing earlier today and lost 4-3 against the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I'm not sure if this is a surprise anymore. Boston blew a lead in that game. They were up 3-0. They lost 4-3. And that gives us a boost because not only have Boston lost, but they've also wasted one of their games. So we now have 2 games in hand on Boston instead of just 1. So I believe we can close to within 2 points of them, which would be fantastic. Although we've got to wait a while before we can do that. So I think that pretty much wraps it up. There's not too many other games on tonight. There's barely any from an Atlantic standpoint. I think the main one was the one that we've just had, Boston away at Pittsburgh. But I will do a little bit of coverage at the Metropolitan tomorrow because that's heating up quite nicely. And I will also look ahead to Florida's game against Minnesota and try and sort of preview that if I can. Until then, that has been Bolts Analysis. And remember, we're still second! Whoa!